I think in general, maybe the Netherlands is not as diverse.
Research shows that especially stereotyping is really strong in the Netherlands.
There is this, I think, self-image of being very liberal, very open, but when you look at Dutch academia, it's super male dominated.
Now you know everything about the research that they've been doing. This video will tell you a bit more about how diversity and inclusion has influenced their careers.
For instance, when I arrived to Amsterdam, one of the things that shocked me the most about the Netherlands, but it's not specific to like the university, but it's really like how the country and the society is organized and what are the norms and the cultures, is that I was very shocked that it was strange for a woman to have a full-time job. I was told that I should work 3 days a week and then I should not be working on Wednesdays afternoons because it's the day that the kids are off at school and like there were all these things like, oh, it's like the default is that you work part-time. And then that of course contradicts with academia because academia is not a part-time job.
Okay, every place I've worked has had its own culture, right? And quite different culture, I will say. You know, going from maths department to NASA changed everything. Max Planck Institute is very different. Amsterdam is very different. Some of that I think it is local, and some of that is a kind of, you know, national characteristics. I mean, American institutions don't do tea breaks, for example, which, you know, in a British university there is 2 tea breaks a day, and you go to NASA and no one takes a tea break. It's like, what is wrong with you people? There is definitely a culture of very overconfident Dutch men in physics departments in this country, which takes a bit of getting used to. On the other hand, there's a lot of enjoyment, and that's the one thing I really liked about coming here, was just the general level of enjoyment of science is massive, and you feel that, right, walking around. I mean, it's people love what they do, they want to share that with people, and for me that was so refreshing.
I also didn't go to school in a Western country, and weirdly in Iran, there are more women in STEM than men. So it's a very different dynamic, and I'm not exactly sure what happens here. That is not the same. But yes, I just feel like there has to be more programs and maybe initiatives at maybe in high school or middle school or something.
There is this, I think, self-image of being very liberal, very open, but when you look at Dutch academia, it's super male dominated and white male dominated. It's like, okay, but you all think you're terribly egalitarian, but look at the reality. And that's one thing I've never quite got my head around, that the data are exceptionally clear on Dutch academia compared to, say, the rest of Europe. But there is a very much self-image of, oh, anyone can make it. And it's like, well, no, actually, clearly not.
In Iran, I know, for example, so when my, for example, parents went to university or my aunt went to university, there were very few women in engineering, for example. But it sort of had really an exponential growth. So by the time my sister went, there were 30%, and by my time it was more than 50%. So it was really quick. I think some of it is that people choose what they do very differently. So you're very pragmatic and you think about what is a job that will give me financial independence, and then you pick these types of careers. I don't think there is as much gender thinking in the sense of what topics are what women are good at and what is it that men are good at.
Internationals, they tend to be a bit disappointed in the Netherlands because we have this image of being very progressive. But in reality, we are quite traditional, especially in gender roles. There's a tendency that when a study or a sector is taken over by women, then the status and the salary go down.
Like there were all these like tensions that seemed like contradictory, like because people were very friendly and very open and very progressive, but then at the same time, it's just common that you don't work all the time.
The ideas are all there. It's making them work in practice, which I think is difficult, or even just pointing out that they're not working in practice. And that's also been something I found quite strange. There's quite a defensive reaction in general to saying, well, actually, but look around you. How is that going? You know, we've got data on this kind of stuff, and it's not that diverse, actually. So why isn't it? And that, I think, that's one thing I've really noticed. People got very defensive about that, basically. Again, and I think things have changed a lot. People are less defensive about that now, which is good.
We have funds for extra VENI researchers, female VENI researchers in STEM, because we really see that the ratio is so out of balance that we try to stimulate the influx of female students into the system, because we can have a perfect evaluation procedure, but if there are only 10% women, yeah, we will never get a good ratio.
Most of us now tend to ask for reference letters, not at the shortlisting stage, but only later, because reference letters can be incredibly biased. And there's been quite a lot of studies that what people tend to write about women, that they focus on how nice they are and friendly and blah, blah, who cares? But they don't focus on scientific skills. So a lot of us now just say, we'll make a shortlist ourselves based on CVs, and only then will we ask for reference letters at a later stage. And that's been also, it reduces work for everyone as well, because you're not asking for reference letters for a bunch of people you're not going to interview.
And we also have a Mosaic program, and that is for the target group of Dutch researchers who have Dutch nationality, who are grown and raised in the Netherlands, but have a migration background. Because we see, well, you can look around at the UvA, that students with a migration background tend not to choose for a career in science, and that's a shame.
I especially think it would help, not just for women, but really to have more diverse sort of representation, even in the student population, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from, you know, that I think is also really important for people to see many different people.
And what I've heard could be really helpful is to have to set a quotum for the pool of candidates. For instance, if you have a vacancy at your university for, let's say, associate professor, if you then say, well, we select 3 male applicants and 3 female applicants, and those 6 will be invited for interviews, for instance. Then you have a diverse pool of people, which makes it easier, I think, to forget about the gender differences. And also the theory says that mediocre men will say, oh, then I don't make a chance, so they don't apply. And women think, oh, well, maybe I have a chance here. And so they convince themselves and they say, okay, maybe I'm not 120% perfect for the job, but I give it a try.
As an institute, one thing we do on PhD recruitment is we do joint recruitment. Rather than people individually recruiting their own PhD students, we do a collective recruitment for all the open positions once a year. And actually, that's also really helps because we get a big pool. It's given us the freedom to say, look, we've got, everyone comes up with 2 or 3 people they want to talk to, but we also perhaps have some people from more non-traditional backgrounds, from universities that we don't particularly know. And we have the room in a collective recruitment to say, let's invite those people as well. So if you were just picking a couple of people for yourself, you might say, oh, it's too risky. But when you've got a bit of freedom, the institute's providing funding for people to come to interview, you can say, okay, I don't know that university system. Happy to have the person come for interview. And then they get here and you're blown away by them. So that's really opened some doors for us, and it's really diversified our PhD student population.
The people who evaluate research for us, so the referees, committee members, we ask them to be inclusive. Diversity is more about the numbers and target groups and underrepresented groups. But even if we make sure that we have the right ratio in whatever kind of diversity aspects, you still have to make sure that everyone in the group feels that they belong there, that they are heard, they don't have to adjust to the culture or way of working of the majority, what's happening now. Also, the committee meetings themselves have to be organized in an inclusive way. And for instance, that means that every committee member has the same time for their contribution to the meeting, so that we avoid that a few people take up all the time, let's say, and other people shy away from taking speak out, things like that.
My advice is to not get very discouraged if people tell you things that bother you, and to learn to ignore people's comments, because what I find actually sometimes discouraging is that a lot of times people say that, for example, women actually don't even apply for certain positions just because, yeah, I mean, they feel, for example, that they will not get that position, but also that people are waiting a lot for the environment to change, and I think that will take very long. So it will help if there are just more women in the environment that's not ideal. That in itself will make the environment better, and more women and minorities being present will make it more pleasant for everybody. And but during this time you might have some unpleasant interaction. But I think just being certain that what you are is good enough is important. And I have like sort of, aside from being a woman, I'm from an Islamic country and I'm from like Muslim background, and I always feel like just being confident in where I come from has really been helpful. And I don't think like, oh, I'm worse just because I come from